Boston, Massachusetts, December 1945. The hotel room carries the weight of grief and something darker. Beatrice Patton stands before a younger woman, her hat and coat discarded, her finger pointed like a weapon. Outside, the city celebrates Christmas. But in this room, a widow confronts the woman who nearly destroyed her marriage a decade earlier. The woman who reappeared during the war. The woman her husband couldn't stop talking about. Jean Gordon, 30 years old, niece by marriage, Red Cross worker, and, according to whispers that reach from Hawaii to the battlefields of Europe, General George S. Patton's mistress. Beatrice's voice cuts through the silence with words learned long ago in the islands, words she's carried for years, waiting for this moment. "May the great worm gnaw your victuals," she declares, invoking an ancient Hawaiian curse, "and may your bones rot joint by little joint." Jean Gordon's face drains of colour. Beatrice's brother flees the room. 10 days later, Jean Gordon turns on the gas in a New York apartment and never wakes up. This is the story of what happened when a general's wife learned about his affairs. A story of a marriage that survived war, scandal, and infidelity. A story that asks a question nobody wanted to answer. What do you do when the man you've loved for 35 years betrays you with someone from your own family? Beatrice Patton first meets George Patton as a child, but their romance doesn't ignite until summer 1902. She's 16, wealthy beyond measure, the daughter of Boston industrialist Frederick Ayer. Her family owns textile mills, lives in mansions, and moves in circles where money speaks louder than military rank. George is 21, attending West Point, tall and ambitious but broke by comparison. He writes poetry. He believes in reincarnation. He's convinced he's lived past lives as warriors, that destiny marked him for greatness. Beatrice sees something in him that others miss. Not just ambition, but hunger. Not just confidence, but need. They married on May 26, 1910 at Beverly Farms, Massachusetts. She's 24, he's 24. The wedding joins old money with old military lineage. Her wealth funds his career in ways the army never could. Custom uniforms, fine horses, the lifestyle of an officer who looks the part. She learns to shoot, to ride, to move from post to post without complaint. They have 3 children. Beatrice in 1911, Ruth Ellen in 1915, and George IV in 1923. Marriage becomes something rare in military families. Partnership. George writes to her constantly, sometimes daily when they're apart. Every decision, every tactical thought, every frustration pours into letters that serve as his diary, his confessional, his strategic planning sessions. Beatrice responds with equal intensity. She manages the family finances, handles crises at home, and advocates for his career when politics threaten his advancement. But she's more than support staff. At a white tie dinner after World War I, an officer disrespects her husband. Beatrice doesn't complain to George later. She doesn't file a report. She leaps onto the offending officer, physically attacking him in front of Washington's military elite. George has to pull her off. It's this spirit, this fierce protection of her husband and his reputation, that defines who she is. The warrior's wife, who is herself a warrior. Then comes Hawaii, 1936. George is 50 years old, commanding officer at Schofield Barracks. Beatrice is 50. They've been married for 26 years. Their oldest daughter is 25 and married. The posting should be paradise, a reward for years of service between wars. The beaches, the culture, the relative peace. Beatrice even learns Hawaiian customs, including curses passed down through generations. One curse in particular captures her attention. The invocation of the great worm is a plea for justice against those who wrong you. She files it away, not knowing she'll need it. Jean Gordon arrived that year. She's 21, beautiful, lively, fresh from her Boston debutante season. She's the daughter of Louise Ayer, Beatrice's half-sister, making Jean Beatrice's niece by marriage. She's stopping in Hawaii en route to Asia, and the Pattons offer hospitality as family does. George is immediately attentive. Too attentive. He suggests an unchaperoned trip to another island, just the 2 of them. Later, historians will debate what Carlo d'Este calls the incident. Whether Jean made a play for her uncle by marriage, whether George's midlife crisis made him vulnerable, whether anything physical actually happened. What's not debatable is what happens when they return. Beatrice knows. Wives always know. The way he looks at Jean. The way he changes when she's in the room. The way he doesn't mention the trip in detail. doesn't meet Beatrice's eyes. The way Jean leaves Hawaii suddenly, her visit is cut short. The way George becomes distant, then remorseful, then stricken with guilt. The marriage nearly ends. Beatrice, who attacked a man at a formal dinner for disrespecting her husband, considers leaving the man she's loved since she was 16. But George is devastated by his own behaviour. Whatever happened or didn't happen in Hawaii, he knows he crossed a line. He begs forgiveness, promises it will never happen again, writes letters of such abject apology that Beatrice slowly, painfully, chooses to rebuild. They spend the next 9 years repairing what broke in Hawaii. She never forgets, but she chooses to stay, and George's career continues its upward trajectory toward the war that will make him legendary. September 1939. Germany invades Poland. The world goes to war, and George Patton finally gets his chance. He's 54 years old, too old by some standards, but age doesn't matter when you've trained your entire life for this moment. He leads tank divisions in North Africa, commands the 7th Army in Sicily, becomes a media sensation, old blood and guts, the general with pearl-handled revolvers and a vocabulary that makes journalists blush. He slaps soldiers in field hospitals, nearly ending his career. Eisenhower saves him, but sidelines him, using Patton as a decoy for D-Day, making the Germans think the invasion will come at Calais because Patton's Phantom Army is stationed there. Then comes the real invasion, and Patton gets the 3rd Army, rolling across France faster than any army in history. He's 60 years old in 1945, commanding men young enough to be his grandsons, living in the mythology he always believed he'd create. Beatrice follows the war through newspapers and his letters. She's in the United States, managing the home front, reading about her husband's victories, his controversies, his growing legend. What she doesn't know is that Jean Gordon has joined the Red Cross. July 1944. Jean Gordon, now 29, arrives in London as a Red Cross donut girl, serving coffee and pastries to soldiers behind the lines. She's been trained, vetted, and sent to Europe, as thousands of American women are sent, to boost morale, to provide a piece of home. When Patton's staff learn she's in theatre, they inform the general. His reaction tells them everything. He orders them to keep her presence quiet, to not let anyone know his niece by marriage is nearby. But he doesn't stay away. According to multiple accounts from staff officers, Patton begins meeting with Jean, claims they're having an affair, boasts about it. Historian Dennis Showalter later suggests these claims might be fabrications. A man under tremendous stress trying to prove his virility, his youth, his vitality in the face of age and the meat grinder of command. Carlo d'Este, Patton's definitive biographer, believes something happened. Maybe not a physical affair, maybe something emotional, but Jean Gordon's presence becomes problematic. Patton can't stop talking about her, to his staff, to fellow officers. The 60-year-old general bragging about sexual conquest like a college boy. Whether it's true doesn't matter. What matters is that people are talking. And word gets back to Beatrice. Here's what we know about Beatrice's reaction during the war. She writes to George. The letters don't survive in public archives, but references to them appear in family correspondence. She's alarmed. She remembers Hawaii. She remembers how close she came to leaving him. She demands answers. George's responses are defensive, then dismissive, then vague. He needs to focus on the war. Jean is family, nothing more. Why is Beatrice bringing up old history when he's trying to defeat Nazi Germany? The letters become strained. Beatrice, back in the United States, watches the war continue and makes a choice. She'll wait. She'll address this when he comes home. She'll protect his reputation and her marriage until the fighting stops. Then they'll have a reckoning. But George Patton never makes it home. December night, 1945, near Mannheim, Germany. The war's been over for 7 months. Patton's been reassigned from commanding the 3rd Army to the 15th Army, essentially a demotion for his inflammatory comments about denazification and his suggestions that America should team with Germany to fight the Soviets. He's riding in the back of his staff car, a 1938 Cadillac, with his chief of staff. They're going pheasant hunting. Private Horace Woodring drives too fast over a railroad crossing. An army truck makes a left turn without warning. The Cadillac hits the truck's side. The 2 men in front are shaken but fine. Patton, seated in the rear, is thrown forward. His head hits the roof. He feels his neck snap. When the medics arrive, he can't move his legs, can't feel below his neck. They transport him to a hospital in Heidelberg. Surgeons stabilize him, but the damage is catastrophic. A broken neck, severed spinal cord, and paralysis from the neck down. George Patton, who spent 60 years preparing for glorious death in battle, lies in a hospital bed unable to move. He develops pneumonia, blood clots, complications from immobility. Beatrice arrives on December 11th, flying from the United States as fast as military transport can carry her. For 10 days, she sits beside his bed. They talk about their life together, about the children, about Hawaii. Their records don't specify what's said. The general who commanded armies across Europe can barely speak above a whisper. He tells her he's tired. He tells her it's okay. On December 21, 1945, at 5:55 in the afternoon, he died. Not from enemy fire, not in the glory of battle, but from a blood clot that reaches his heart while he lies paralyzed in a German hospital. He's 60 years old. Beatrice makes immediate decisions. He'll be buried in Luxembourg, in the American cemetery at Hamm with the men he commanded. Not in America, not in some grand memorial. With his soldiers. The funeral happens on Christmas Eve. Thousands attend. Beatrice stands rigid, accepting condolences, the widow of a legend. Then she returns to the United States, to Boston, to a hotel room, to unfinished business. She summons Jean Gordon, uses her brother Fred as an intermediary, tells him to arrange a meeting, doesn't explain why. Fred contacts Jean, who's been back in the United States since the war ended. Jean agrees, perhaps curious, perhaps afraid, perhaps knowing exactly why Beatrice wants to see her. They arrive at the hotel first, Fred and Jean waiting in the room. When Beatrice walks in, she removes her hat and coat with deliberate precision. She doesn't sit, she doesn't offer pleasantries. She looks at Jean Gordon, the young woman who nearly destroyed her marriage in 1936, who reappeared during the war, whom her husband boasted about to anyone who would listen. And she points her finger. The Hawaiian curse comes out perfectly, each word chosen, each syllable an indictment. May the great worm gnaw your vitals. Jean's face goes grey, and may your bones rot joint by little joint. Fred Ayer runs from the room. What happens next isn't recorded, whether Beatrice says more, whether Jean responds, whether there's screaming or silence, whether Beatrice demands answers Jean can't or won't provide. The meeting ends. They leave separately. Beatrice returns to her grief and her family. Jean goes to New York. January 8, 1946. 18 days after Patton's death. 13 days after his funeral. 10 days after Beatrice invokes the curse. Jean Gordon is found dead on the kitchen floor of a friend's apartment in New York City. The oven's gas is turned on. The medical examiner ruled it a suicide. The New York Times reports that photographs of General Patton were scattered around her body. She's 30 years old. The official story is clear. Despondent over her uncle's death, unable to cope with the loss, took her own life in grief. But people who know the family whisper other explanations. Jean and Patton were lovers, and she couldn't live without him. That Beatrice's curse actually worked. That Jean's death was too convenient, too perfectly timed. That maybe, just maybe, someone made sure John Gordon would never tell her side of the story. No evidence supports murder. The investigation finds suicide. But the timing haunts everyone who knows the sequence of events. The confrontation. The curse. The death days later. So what really happened? Did Jean Gordon and George Patton have an affair? Dennis Showalter argues Patton made it up, a stressed general fabricating sexual conquests to maintain his self-image as virile and powerful. The physical evidence is thin. No love letters survive. No witnesses saw them in compromising positions. Patton's claims to fellow officers could be fabrications, lies told by a man desperate to prove he wasn't aging, wasn't losing his edge, wasn't becoming irrelevant. Carlo D'Este, who spent years researching Patton's biography, believes something happened. Maybe not sex, maybe not a traditional affair, but an emotional entanglement that crossed boundaries. Jean made Patton feel young, made him feel desired, gave him something. Beatrice, after 35 years of marriage, couldn't provide. Novelty. The Hawaii incident, D'Este argues, nearly destroyed the marriage precisely because something physical happened, and Jean's reappearance in Europe during the war reignited whatever existed before. Some historians point to Ruth Ellen Patton Totten, the general's daughter. She defended her father vehemently during his life, denied that any affair ever happened, and called it slander against a great man. But after Ruth Ellen's death, her private papers revealed she knew about Jean Gordon, knew about Hawaii, knew the affair started when Jean was 21 and her father was 49. She protected his reputation in public while knowing the truth in private. What did Beatrice know? Everything. She knew about Hawaii immediately in 1936. She knew when Jean arrived in Europe during the war. She knew what people were saying about her husband and her niece. She made a calculation that millions of wives have made throughout history. His career mattered more than her pride. His reputation mattered more than her pain. The war mattered more than her marriage. She'd address it after. She'd demand answers after. She'd make him choose after the war ended, after he came home, after she could confront him on her terms. But he died before she could have that confrontation. So she confronted Jean instead. The curse wasn't supernatural. The curse was a widow telling the woman who humiliated her, who pursued her husband, who didn't respect boundaries of family or marriage, that there would be consequences. Whether Jean's suicide resulted from guilt, from grief, from Beatrice's confrontation, or from despair at a life that lost meaning when Patton died, we'll never know. What we know is that Beatrice Patton carried those Hawaiian words for nearly 10 years, waiting for the right moment to use them. And when that moment came, she didn't hesitate. After Jean's death, Beatrice never publicly discusses her, never mentions Hawaii, never confirms or denies the affairs. She becomes the devoted widow, protecting George's legacy, managing his papers, and ensuring his place in history. She rides horses, maintains the family estate, and raises her grandchildren. On September 30th, 1953, she was thrown from her horse during a fox hunt near the family farm in Massachusetts. She suffers a ruptured aneurysm. She dies the same day. She's 67 years old. Before her death, she made one request: to be buried beside George in Luxembourg. The army accommodates her wish. A small portion of her ashes is scattered over his grave. The rest are interred at the family farm. But symbolically, legally, officially, Beatrice Patton rests with her husband. The wife who stood by him through scandal, through war, through betrayal. The wife who protected his reputation even when he didn't deserve it. The wife who waited 35 years to unleash a curse on the woman who tried to take him away. The Patton marriage reveals something uncomfortable about military families, about powerful men, about the choices women make when their husbands' careers depend on silence. Beatrice could have left him after Hawaii, could have divorced him, taken her wealth, and raised her children alone. She had the money, the social standing, the support network. But she stayed, not because she was weak. Beatrice Patton, who physically attacked a man for insulting her husband, was never weak. She stayed because she calculated that his potential greatness mattered more than her immediate happiness. That the coming war would need men like George Patton, regardless of his personal failures. That she could salvage the marriage if she was strong enough to endure the humiliation. And she was right. George Patton became one of the most effective battlefield commanders in American history. The Third Army's race across France shortened the war, saved Allied lives, and liberated concentration camps. His tactical brilliance at the Battle of the Bulge prevented a German breakthrough. His leadership inspired men who would have broken under lesser commanders. None of that excuses the affairs. None of that justifies his betrayal of Beatrice's trust. But it explains why she chose to stay, to forgive, to protect him even when he didn't protect her. Jean Gordon's role remains ambiguous. Was she a willing participant, pursuing an older man for reasons we can only guess? Was she manipulated by a powerful figure who exploited family connection and military authority? Did anything physical actually happen? Or was this entire scandal built on Patton's fabricated boasts and wartime gossip? We have Jean's actions. Going to Hawaii at 21, joining the Red Cross and being stationed in Europe, where Patton commanded. Being present enough that Patton's staff knew about her. But we don't have her words. No diary. No letters to friends. No confession or denial. Just her death, 10 days after Beatrice cursed her, with Patton's photographs scattered around her body. The suicide of a woman who lost the man she loved, whether that love was appropriate or not. Whether it was reciprocated or not. Whether it was real or imagined. The Hawaiian curse adds a layer of mystery that historians struggle to address. Did Beatrice actually believe in its power? Was it psychological warfare, words chosen to terrify Jean into guilt and despair? Was Jean's suicide a coincidence, her death unrelated to Beatrice's confrontation? The curse itself, "May the great worm gnaw your vitals and may your bones rot joint by little joint," is traditional Hawaiian justice magic, not malevolent sorcery, but a call for cosmic balance, for wrongdoing to be punished. Beatrice learned it during her years at Schofield Barracks. She remembered it. She saved it, and when the moment came, she deployed it with precision. Whether the curse killed Jean Gordon or whether Jean's own despair killed her, doesn't change the central truth. Beatrice wanted Jean to know there were consequences, wanted her to understand that betraying family, pursuing another woman's husband, destroying a marriage for selfish desire, all of these actions demanded payment. Jean paid. Modern audiences struggle with this story. We want Beatrice to leave George immediately. We want her to prioritize her dignity over his career. We want her to publicly expose the affairs, to demand accountability, to refuse to protect a man who betrayed her. But Beatrice lived in a different era with different calculations. Military wives in the 1930s and 1940s didn't have the options women have today. Divorce meant social ostracism. Public scandal meant ending George's career and their family's standing. Staying meant enduring private pain for public stability. She made the choice millions of women made. She stayed, she forgave, she demanded better. And when he failed to deliver better, she stayed anyway because the alternative cost too much. That doesn't make her weak. It makes her pragmatic, strategic, playing a long game where her husband's legacy became her legacy, where his success became her vindication, where protecting his reputation protected their children's future. What did Beatrice say when she found out about the affairs? The historical record gives us pieces. She confronted George about Hawaii in 1936. The marriage nearly ended. She confronted him again about Jean during the war through letters. She was alarmed, angry, demanding answers he didn't provide. And finally, after his death, she confronted Jean with a curse that left the younger woman pale and shaken. But what she said in private, in the letters that don't survive, in the conversations no historian documented, we can only imagine. Did she scream? Did she cry? Did she threaten? Did she plead? Did she demand he choose between Jean and their marriage? Did she offer ultimatums he ignored? Or did she, as military wives often must, suffer in silence while calculating how to survive intact? We know she loved him. 35 years of marriage, 3 children, countless letters, unwavering support through controversies that would have destroyed lesser careers. We know she forgave him at least once, after Hawaii, choosing reconciliation over revenge. And we know that when he died, she protected his legacy while ensuring the woman who contributed to her pain didn't escape consequences. Jean Gordon's death remains the story's darkest element. Suicide 10 days after Beatrice cursed her. Photos of Patton were scattered around her body. A young woman died at 30, while the wife who cursed her lived another 8 years. Some call it justice, some call it tragedy. Some call it a coincidence elevated to mythology by timing and circumstance. What it reveals is that infidelity destroys more than just marriages. It destroys families, reputations, lives. Jean Gordon, whatever her role in this story, ended up dead on a kitchen floor. Beatrice Patton, whatever her pain, lived with the knowledge that her curse preceded that death. And George Patton, the man both women loved or claimed to love, died never having to answer for any of it, never having to choose, never having to explain, never having to face Beatrice's full fury or Jean's full despair. He escaped into death and legend while the women who loved him dealt with the aftermath. The legacy of this story extends beyond the Pattons. It's the story of every military family where duty conflicts with fidelity, where career demands supersede personal integrity, where wives must choose between their dignity and their family's survival. Beatrice Patton wasn't unique. She was typical. The strong woman behind the famous man, the wife who managed everything while he got the glory, the partner who forgave the unforgivable because the alternative meant losing everything she'd built. Her choice to stay, to forgive, to protect him even after Hawaii, even after Jean Gordon, even after death, that choice defined an entire generation of military wives who made similar calculations, who stayed when leaving made more sense, who forgave when fury felt more justified, who protected reputations while their own hearts broke. So, what did Beatrice Patton say when she found out about her husband's affairs? First time, in 1936, she nearly left him. Second time, during the war, she demanded answers he wouldn't provide. Third time, after his death, she cursed the woman who helped him betray her. Each response escalated. Each response revealed a woman pushed further toward the edge of what she could endure. The first time, she chose forgiveness. The second time, she chose to wait. The third time, she chose vengeance. Not against George, who was beyond her reach, but against Jean, who was still alive, still breathing, still carrying the secret of what happened between them. Whether the curse killed Jean, or whether guilt killed Jean, or whether despair killed Jean doesn't matter. What matters is that Beatrice Patton, after 35 years of choosing her husband over herself, finally chose herself, finally said enough, finally demanded that someone pay for the pain she carried in silence. The Hawaiian curse echoes through military history. The widow's fury, the niece's suicide, the general's legend is untouched by scandal. It's a story that makes us uncomfortable because it has no clear heroes. George Patton was a brilliant commander and a faithless husband. Beatrice Patton was a devoted wife and possibly an accomplice to psychological destruction. Jean Gordon was either a victim or a homewrecker, depending on who tells the story. The truth, as always, is more complicated than any single narrative allows. People are complicated. Marriages are complicated. War makes everything more complicated. And when powerful men betray the women who love them, the consequences ripple outward in ways nobody can predict or control. Think about the marriages around you, the compromises people make, the betrayals they endure, the choices between pride and stability. Beatrice Patton's story isn't ancient history. It's happening right now in military families, in political families, in any situation where one partner's career demands the other partner's silence. How much would you endure? What would make you finally say enough? And if you had the chance, as Beatrice did, to confront the person who helped destroy your trust, what would you say? Would you curse them? Would you forgive them? Would you seek understanding or demand justice? These questions don't have easy answers. They didn't in 1945, they don't today, but they're worth asking. Because the Patton marriage, with all its complications and compromises and betrayals, holds a mirror to every relationship where power and duty complicate love. If this story made you think differently about loyalty, about marriage, about the price of greatness, leave a comment below. What would you have done in Beatrice's position? Would you have stayed or left? And if you're interested in more stories about the hidden lives of historical figures, the personal dramas behind public legends, hit that subscribe button. Because history isn't just battles and politics, it's people making impossible choices under extraordinary pressure. And sometimes those choices include ancient Hawaiian curses delivered with perfect, devastating precision.